Welcome to the STEM Talk. In just 30 minutes each month, join experts from across the STEM landscape as they provide factual information, practical strategies, and actionable resources to help you navigate the ever-changing world of STEM education, workforce development, policy, and advocacy. Hosted by the After School STEM Hub, STEM Education Coalition, and STEM Ecosystems, the STEM Talk creates a safe space for dialogue while maintaining a focus on information that matters to you and the community that you serve. Today's episode is called States Take the Wheel, because while federal policy may be unpredictable, state capitals are accelerating forward with transformative STEM initiatives. I'm Jenny Frank, the director of the STEM Ecosystem Initiative at TIES. Today, we're diving into state policy landscape to help you understand what these changes mean for your programs and how you can effectively engage. Whether you're working with state policymakers, planning your 2026 advocacy strategy, or simply trying to position your ecosystem as a trusted partner, this conversation will help you navigate the opportunities ahead and prepare for what's coming next. Let's welcome our guest experts. Today we have special guest Austin Hall. He is the Director of Policy at the STEM Education Coalition, focusing on government relations, research, and member advocacy initiatives. Austin specializes in policy and advocacy efforts related to federal government research and STEM education portfolio, systems alignment, education pathways in STEM, informal STEM learning, workforce development, and state STEM strategies. We also welcome back Della Cronin, Principal at Bose Public Affairs, James Brown, Executive Director at the STEM Education Coalition, Leslie Brooks, STEM Manager at After School Alliance, and Anita Krishnamurthy, the Senior Vice President for STEM and Youth Civic Engagement at the After School Alliance. Let's get started.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Jenny. Hello, everyone. I am Austin Hall with the STEM Education Coalition. And today we're taking a journey outside the tremendously harmonious federal policymaking process and diving into what's shaping the next era of STEM education policy in the states. If there's one big takeaway from this session, it's that states are where the action really is in the policy conversation, especially as we see the rise of AI, career-connected learning, and new approaches to the teacher pipeline and funding. So today I'll walk through 5 major state-level trends and what they mean for educators, after-school networks, and STEM ecosystem partners on the ground. But first, let's start with the obvious question. Why does state-level policy matter so much? Simply put, states overwhelmingly control the levers that determine what STEM education looks like day to day. They set the standards, the teacher certification requirements, the CTE pathways, the funding priorities, and the overall delivery systems that make STEM education possible day in and day out. So even though all the national trends get the headlines these days, the real implementation, it happens in the states. One caveat before we continue this conversation, every state is different. There's different governance structures, different budgets, different politics. But that diversity also means that there's a lot of innovation and experimentation that's happening. Hopefully, some of which can be replicated elsewhere or used as lessons learned. So with that, we'll go to the next slide. The first trend, one of the most exciting, is career-connected learning. That's getting the most momentum and having the most conversation at the moment in states all around the country and all those diverse places. States are aligning K-12 and post-secondary systems around workforce development in ways that link education directly to regional economic needs. We're seeing clear movement towards pathways that begin with early career exploration and lead to real opportunities like internships, apprenticeships, and post-secondary credentials. A few examples to highlight here as models. Indiana recently overhauled its entire CTE framework into the next level programs of study. That's what the program is called. That specifically aligns high school coursework with employer-validated pathways. In Washington, they're actually funding career exploration, leveraging after-school settings. And after-school provides a great opportunity and flexibility for career exploration activities to happen in conjunction with industry, with formal education providers, and other stakeholders. And in Texas, the legislature established what's called the Tri-Agency Workforce Initiative to coordinate workforce and education systems. The law specifically ties K through 12 CTE funding directly to economic development and regional labor data. So what's happening here is that states are building systems that start with exploration and end with employment. That's generally the overall policy goals that we're seeing right now. And if you're an educator or a community partner, it's the perfect moment to plug into those conversations early because these pathways will define what STEM education means over the next decade. Trend number 2. We've had an awesome decade with computer science, and it's still there. The momentum is still there. But what's going on with this AI thing? Computer science momentum continues. More than 40 states now have K through 12 computer science standards or mandates, and that's awesome progress and great to see. But the surge we're seeing now is around AI literacy and what that means for workforce, for education, for society broadly. What we've seen so far is that most of the activity has been executive branch driven, whether it's the governors, education departments, you name it. And it's governors launching task forces, departments of education creating guidance, and so on. But really going into 2026, we expect the legislatures themselves to take a much more direct role in defining how AI is implemented in education settings, how systems of government prepare workforce development initiatives towards AI. And it's going to be a huge conversation in pretty much every state legislature, except for those that are not in. I think Texas is one, Montana's not in next year maybe. But in the state legislatures that are in, it'll be a large part of the conversation. And that's the opportunity for STEM ecosystems. It's going to create demand for educator training, industry partnerships, and after school experiences focused on responsible AI use and how students are interacting with these tools, how educators are interacting with these tools, and how parents are interacting with these tools. A few states to highlight that have already done some things on this issue. Virginia is one of the few states that have enacted legislation to establish committees or task forces to look at AI education frameworks to figure out what responsible guidelines and goals really look like. In Utah and California, that's been executive branch driven. They've established these state task forces to really look at how AI is being implemented in education settings. And that's going to impact the delivery of hands-on STEM education too. And the truth is that we don't fully understand or know how exactly this will all be implemented. But we know that we're about to enter an era where there's going to be quite a bit of experimentation in the classroom, in after school, in the workforce, and beyond. Trend number 3 is all about access for all and the focus on educators. Legislatures in states like California, North Carolina, and Illinois are funding targeted investments in the STEM teacher pipelines, rural access grants, and after-school expansion programs, all aimed at closing opportunity gaps in coursework, advanced coursework, and hands-on learning. Another creative trend that we're seeing is making STEM mobile, literally, meeting students where they are. We've seen states such as Texas, Arkansas, Maryland, and Kentucky all spending state dollars to create and expand their fleet of mobile STEM labs that travel to rural communities, inner cities, and bring robotics, lab kits, hands-on experiences, and professional development to students and teachers who might not otherwise have that access. These programs are building bridges between urban and rural regions. They're broadly popular among policymakers, and they're giving ecosystems a real chance to demonstrate impact where it's hardest to measure. Focusing on the teacher pipeline, states like North Carolina and Indiana are investing directly in the STEM teacher pipeline through professional development grants, credentialing programs, and externships that connect educators to industry settings for professional development and to get that comprehensive understanding of how education and industry can work more seamlessly. One important dynamic to note here is that I think this is where the STEM community and researchers and the education community broadly are still trying to figure out the best approach to investing in all aspects of the teacher pipeline, particularly to understand what's most effective for strengthening the pipeline long term. With that comes experimentation, and sometimes we're implementing policies or programs that may not be necessarily most effective. So we're going to see some state legislatures adopt some of these things that may not be effective, but they're trying. But what we're hoping is that we get some good models coming out of certain states that we can use and highlight as best practices that we hope states can move forward and invest in the future. This is my personal favorite trend, stakeholder coordination. We're watching a surge in states forming STEM offices, cross-agency councils, or contracting or setting up agreements with outside entities to coordinate statewide STEM strategies. In other words, they're institutionalizing what many of us might consider these beautiful things called STEM ecosystems. These structures make collaboration sustainable. They improve resource alignment and systems alignment, reduce duplicative investments where it's not the most efficient way to spend money, and they build long-term communications channels between agencies within the government, schools, nonprofits, and business partners, after-school providers, and those networks. Some examples include Alabama, where they have a intergovernment STEM council, or within the government that's housed. It was originally created by the governor, and then the legislature just this year actually put it into statute. So that's an intergovernment body. And also in Alabama, they have a non-government body called the Alabama STEM Ecosystem. And that's really one model to look at. There's purely intergovernment like Michigan, and then there's quasi models like Texas, where the statewide STEM ecosystem is housed within the state education agency, where the regional STEM ecosystems are non-government agencies. And those are the different models that we like to highlight, but it's a great way to keep the policy process moving and ensure that implementation of all these different programs and all these different priorities happen in an effective manner, because all the necessary stakeholders are around the table. And just one little pro tip for any advocates that are engaged at the State House or even locally. One stakeholder group that's becoming increasingly influential at all levels of policymaking are parents and guardians. Don't underestimate the power of parent-driven advocacy in state houses right now, or in the school boards, or here at the federal level. They can be good partners in advocacy, or they can ruin your advocacy efforts if they're not engaged. So just a pro tip for those that are building their advocacy strategies for 2026. And really, one important thing here is the monies. Funding will always be top of mind, but it varies wildly from state to state. Going into 2026, some states are projecting flat or even tightening revenues. Others have surpluses that might allow them to increase targeted STEM spending, particularly for some of those priorities and trends we've talked about before, like computer science, AI, career and technical education, and teacher professional development, recruitment and retention pipelines. The homework that I would prescribe to anyone that's engaged on funding or wants to be engaged or wants to advocate for funding at the State House or locally is to really understand which funding levers matter most in your state. It varies state to state. In some states, it's the base funding formula where schools have more local flexibility to spend a base formula, whether it's on STEM or anything else. In other states, it might be a line item specific for STEM, for professional development, for after school. So really do understand where those funding levers are, and look at different models like tax abatements and what's becoming an increasing way for schools to spend more money, or to fill programs that were funded by COVID money that kind of went away or would have lost their funding stream after the COVID money expired, is public municipal bonds. That's becoming, I think there's been an 80% increase around the country and locally driven public municipal bonds to fund various education items, whether it's infrastructure, programming, teachers, you name it. So do get creative, particularly in states that might have a challenging budget situation. There's many levers out there. And finally, we'll talk about, well, actually not finally, I got 2 more slides. We'll talk about the 2026 broad outlook for policy and what that means. What we can expect is continued policy changes and investments in career-connected learning and workforce development. We've seen this as a priority the past couple of years, and it's going to continue, if not expand, in its priority in 2026 in pretty much every state. In pretty much every state, we're also going to see broader legislation on AI standards in education, digital privacy. There's going to probably be a whole package of bills in every single state on the topic of AI in education, whether that's standards or workforce development and what it means for AI-driven careers, teacher literacy, professional development. And we're probably going to see bills in most every state that seek to ban AI tools in education altogether. It's going to be a very dynamic conversation, and it's an opportunity for ecosystems to be engaged. We will continue to see teacher recruitment and retention remain a major priority. And we also expect many states to update their economic development blueprints to reflect these emerging technology industries that are coming into states. The bottom line here is that the direction of funding and regulation in 2026 will look different in every state, but these overall trends will be there in most every state. But it's going to be really AI, workforce development, and teachers that dominate these conversations. And finally, we'll close with just some successful state STEM advocacy strategy tips. What can you all do with this? Well, if you're part of a STEM ecosystem, an after-school network, or an education industry partnership, these would be my recommendations on where I'd focus. First, I would start by mapping your influence points within state plans, state councils. If you have a state STEM council or state governor's STEM task force or one of those bodies, be engaged on that. And if your state doesn't have one, I would make that agenda item 1A on your policy agenda, is creating that state coordinating body for STEM education conversations to happen. The second thing I would do is go about finding partners in your advocacy. The STEM education works closely with the After School STEM Hub and the After School Alliance through a project funded by the Overdeck Family Foundation to engage partners like the After School networks in our advocacy around STEM education at the state level. After School networks are extremely valuable advocacy partners, business groups, higher education institutions, teacher associations. These alliances, they're able to move bills and legislation and advocate for funding in a lot more effective manner than just going at it alone. Do embed your STEM and workforce ecosystems directly into your state's economic development blueprint. As I mentioned before, many states are going to go about updating their economic development blueprint, and this is a real opportunity to highlight the role of STEM ecosystems and just be engaged in the conversation with industry and those government officials that care about connecting the economy to workforce, to education, as they update these things. And as a part of that, there's other advisory bodies and committees and conversations that will come out of that naturally. So strongly encouraged to embed your STEM ecosystem and organization in those conversations. And finally, build bipartisan coalitions, because innovation and workforce development are issues that cut across party lines, especially at the state level and more close to home at the local level. So if we can do that, I think we'll keep STEM education at the center of how states think about competitiveness, innovation, education and academic performance, and community development. So with that, I think we have some time for questions.
Thank you so much, Austin. And real quick before we jump into questions, just also want to make sure to wish everyone a happy National STEM Day coming up this Saturday on November 8th. Hopefully you have some kind of activities you're getting into. So I will stop sharing the screen and we can move into questions. And then also if James or Della has anything they wanted to add in after that presentation. James, you're on mute.
Sorry about that. Austin, let me ask you a question to follow up on the sort of regional economic development framework. What's your observation on how much the federal dollars that are so regional and sort of tied to economic development, like which way do you think the chain is flowing? Are federal dollars having a handle in introducing, states to opportunities to do that kind of sort of regional economic development, or is it the other way around, where what you see is the federal dollars are actually flowing from successful state efforts that are regional in that space?
Yeah, thanks, James. I think overall, particularly coming out of a pandemic, the federal government's investment in developing regional-led economic development plans and investments really inspired that to happen around the country. So I think it first started as a top-down approach. And through that, we've seen some models being developed that were really exciting for other states to try to replicate. And so when we think about things like the CHIPS Act and how that inspired a lot of investments from a purely economic development focus, with requirements to incorporate education stakeholders in those processes. I think that started there. And what we're seeing now is an opportunity to take those models and expand them back up and inspire how federal funds are spent in items like Perkins CTE and WIOA money. And we're going to see, I think, the federal government make some changes here soon to reflect those more locally driven economic development and education development strategies.
Yeah,
Austin,
it's a really interesting interaction. That's why I think there's a lot that's going to be driven by that.
Austin, there are a couple questions in the chat about the data from the presentation. Do you have recommendations for where people within their states can look to find some of these initiatives happening and going on? There's one specific for someone in Illinois to find out more information within the Illinois legislature about state initiatives regarding STEM teacher pipelines and after school STEM expansion.
Yeah. So if we're talking purely about, what is the legislature doing? I think every state legislature has a website at this point that's pretty good about having a modern day search function. And so sometimes it's as simple as going to the state legislature website, typing in those keywords around quotes, and then seeing what information it pops up with there. That's specific to, hey, what legislation is out there, what has passed before. You can look at current session, previous sessions, and you can filter it down that way. If you're looking for more specific state economic data or education data, it depends state by state on where that's all housed. But more importantly, if you have any specific questions that I can help or our team can help look at, please just reach out and we'll help you we'll point you in the right direction. There's 50 states and territories all over the place with different ways to search this stuff. And we're fortunate to have tools to help us do that for us and can help get you the right information.
And I'll just add to that for Illinois and other states too. Every state, every state has an after school network. I don't know about every state has some version of a STEM network. It's called something different in every state. So I suspect some Googling will give you at least a starting point. And I think that those of us who have worked with the after school networks and the STEM networks find those folks to be wonderfully generous with their time and assistance when helping like-minded folks do the work that we're all doing.
Wonderful. And I see multiple questions in the chat about the slides. Yes, Jenny will be sending out the slides afterwards. Saw one question about if we can share the chat. I do not know the answer to that. So if you want to grab folks' contact information who has shared it, go ahead and peek through the chat right now so that you have that and you can build up some network connections from this gathering. I do have another question for you, Austin, James, and Della. So this is thinking about policy engagement for local ecosystems. So from a local ecosystem standpoint, what's the most effective way for regional STEM networks or coordinators to engage with policymakers before the 2026 legislative session so that their voices shape the conversation rather than respond to it.
Austin, you should take that one.
Awesome. Well, the first thing I would do is figure out if your state has a STEM council or a STEM task force, both regionally and statewide. And if they do, engage in that now. And sometimes they may be a little hesitant to talk about policy because especially if they're a part of a government entity, they're restricted from advocacy. But still, it can help shape the advocacy agenda when you talk about things that are needed around the state, where resources can be better directed. So do engage those different task forces and councils if you have them. If you don't, I would say engage, try to map out the major players that are going to be making decisions. In 2026, the education committee chairs, your own legislator, wherever you live, and map those things out and be ready to engage with them early on and express your priorities to them now. If you have specific priorities in your advocacy agenda pretty well determined already, now's the time to go ahead and do that outreach to those key lawmakers and your lawmaker that represents you and where you live. We all have a constitutional right to petition and advocate our government. So you can do that on your personal basis and on behalf of your ecosystem with those key players. And the other thing that I would say is, all that being done, if you don't have an advocacy agenda, that's where I would start. And I would do that in coordination with some of your local stakeholders, whether that's local after-school programs or other statewide associations or entities that you work with that you think would be valuable partners in developing that agenda.
Thank you, Austin. We have a couple more questions and 3 minutes, so we'll try to get to them. What can you all speak to what's being done nationally to bring university TTPs, I'm not 100% sure what that acronym is for, into the
Teacher
conversation?
training programs.
Yeah.
Thank you. Into the conversations with after-school programs to support the STEM teacher and educator pathways.
I'll go first, and then I suspect others will have something to say. And I think that this is a good example of how, even though, as Austin says, for now, all the action is at the state level, Congress certainly isn't giving us any lessons in productivity these days. But there is work that's still being done at the federal and national level to support STEM educators. And to that very point, the STEM Hub is working with like-minded folks on after school to put together legislation that would support the connection between informal and after-school provider program providers and that pipeline. So making sure that when we're talking about the teaching work shortage, that we are looking to informal and after-school settings as places where we have people who are clearly interested in this work, and how can we make it easier for them to become teachers in classrooms, assuming that's something that they would want to do. That we have bipartisan support for that kind of work on Capitol Hill, and that's something that we're actively doing now as a community in Washington, D.C. I don't know if James or Austin had other thoughts on this question.
Della, one thing I'll say on that is, we're far enough into the teacher shortage that there are programs starting to really raise money and launch to build new teacher education programs within the universities. And I think one of the things that's happened in after school has gotten so well recognized as being a key component of a strategy to deal with STEM education issues writ large. Like, one of the things I think the after school community could really do is track the formation of new teacher education programs at the university level and engage with them, so that I don't know that we have a firm answer for how do you integrate the use of after school into a modern teacher education program, right? Like that's an interesting conversation to have, because we're definitely starting to see the leading edge of a big uptick in both corporate investment in teacher education, teacher prep, and state investment in them too.
I'll just say as the after school rep on this call, right? Like this is not new. It's been tried before. There are many versions of this. The state of California had done this for a little while. The University of Texas at Austin had their sort of You Teach program, which was sort of a flagship effort like this. And at some level, I'll say it's also a local and state level issue, right? And so because teacher training is often done at sort of in particular universities. So it's certainly something that we're always looking at. And the data on some of that is sometimes interesting, right? Like I think what happened in California is when people actually went into after school programs, they liked the after school environment and chose that as a career rather than becoming a school day teacher. And so it's not a new idea, and it's been in the works for a long time, but I'll just say that I don't know if it's a federally mandatable kind of thing. I think it's a state level initiative, and definitely engage with your state level legislature and talk to the local universities if you have strong after school programs that you think could serve to provide that kind of practicum training for the sort of student teachers.
Thank you for joining us for this insightful discussion on the policy landscape affecting STEM education and workforce development. We hope you've gained valuable perspectives and actionable strategies from our conversations. We'll continue this important dialogue with critical insights about top STEM priorities and more guidance on navigating the current advocacy landscape. To learn more about the work of STEM Education Coalition, After School STEM Hub, and STEM ecosystems, please visit our websites. Until next time, keep advocating for a strong STEM education and workforce nationwide.